First of all, there again, I want to say thank you for being here. As we know, this morning at Maple and Mount Vernon, we had an officer-involved fatal shooting that occurred this morning. At about 9:29 this morning in the area of 15th and Gow, one of our officers was patrolling that area. He was stopped at a stop sign there at 15th and Gow. There was another vehicle, a red vehicle that was there that had its left turn signal light on, giving the indication that it was going to make a left-hand turn. The officer also was going to make a left-hand turn, so the officer yielded to allow that driver. However, the driver never did make the turn. For some reason, this driver decides to pull out a flashlight and flash it at the officer for whatever reason. The officer made the decision to contact the gentleman, who is identified as Mr. David M. Zehring, Z-H-R-I-N-G, Zehring. Like I said, he pulled out a flashlight, pointed in the direction of the police officer, which caused him some concern to make sure that the gentleman was okay. He went over and contacted him. When the officer contacted Mr. Zehring asked the officer what was his name and badge number, and the officer talked to him briefly, and as the officer wanted to ask him, what his name was, he decided he wanted to pull off, so the officer tried to get the tag number of the vehicle that Mr. Zehring was driving. As the officer tried to get the tag number, Mr. Zehring decided to speed off, and the chase was on for the most part. When you look at from the time he left the area of 15th and Gow, he left going southbound, came out on 13th Street, went from 13th Street over to McLean, south on McLean, where it turns into Meridian. During that stretch, speeds had reached a range of 50 miles an hour to about 75 miles an hour. At that time, the officer was assisted by the Sedgwick County Sheriff's Office in regards to two of their deputies assisted us with the pursuit. I can tell you that stop sticks were deployed. However, they're on Meridian, but he was able to bypass the stop sticks on Meridian and kept going southbound until he reached the area of Meridian and Maple, where he then went westbound on Maple. We also deployed stop sticks on Maple. At that time, he did run over the stop sticks, and the right front driver's tire is the one that ran over those stop sticks. During this chase, Mr. Zehring, for some unknown reason, placed his flashlight outside of the driver's side window and was flashing it back at the officer. We don't know why he was doing that. And you can draw your own conclusions, but we don't know why he made that decision to put his flashlight out and shine it in the direction of the police officer that was pursuing him. Once Mr. Zehring turned from Maple onto Mount Carmel, he quickly stopped his vehicle along the east curb. Once he stopped that vehicle, within seconds, he opens the door in stride. As he's walking towards the police officer, he's reaching in his jacket with his right hand. He comes out with the knife. He uses his left hand to open up this knife, so now you have an exposed blade as he's approaching the police officer as well as sheriff deputies that were behind him. The first officer that he approached with that knife out was originally our officer, and as he was coming towards our officer, the sheriff deputy discharged their taser in the direction of Mr. Zehring. However, Mr. Zehring was able to withstand the initial taser, and then he directed his attention to another deputy who also fired his taser. There again, Mr. Zehring, for whatever reason, was able to not go down with those two different bursts of tasers. And so as he is pursuing the second deputy, that's when the officer fired multiple rounds because he was a threat not only to the original deputy, our officer, but also the other deputy that he was pursuing. Once he was shot, he did go down. He was transported to St. Francis, Via Christi St. Francis Hospital, where at about 3:08 he died of his gunshot wounds.